Hello there, Professor. This setup is a little wonky, so you'll have to bear with me a little bit, but this is my informative speech too. And I'll be using my laptop for visual aids. It might be kind of hard to see, but you'll see them anyways, because I'll send them to you. But I guess I'll just get started. 3, 2, 1. According to our U.S. Constitution, the First Amendment protects our freedom of speech, religion, press, petition, and the right to assemble. While this may be common knowledge, have you ever thought about if the citizens of other countries were afforded these same principles? The purpose of my speech is to inform you all about how foreign countries treat the protection of speech and how they go about all other aspects of the First Amendment that are afforded to us. This topic is significant to us because we often don't realize or even take for granted the protections that are given to us via the Bill of Rights. And even more so, we tend to forget that oftentimes the citizens of foreign countries are not afforded these same rights. Tonight I will be discussing how foreign countries handle civil liberties, specifically in Russia and China, because I figured that those two are the most representative of Europe and Asia, respectively. To begin, I will start by talking about Russian civil liberties and how their citizens are handled. When I presented myself with the question, do Russian citizens have civil liberties, or the freedom of speech, I was surprised to learn that the answer is both somehow yes and no. In the Russian Constitution, which I accessed electronically on March 8th, it specifically says in Article 29, everyone shall have the right to freedom of thought and speech. And while this may seem cut and dry, I found that this statement has somewhat of an asterisk to it. Censored Planet, which is an interdisciplinary lab in computer science and engineering at the University of Michigan, specifically the engineering, conducted a study which was published on November 10th, 2019, which claimed that Russia had blocked more than 170,000 websites in 2007, and that number has since grown exponentially. And if you'll look at my, plugged in still. If you'll look at my visual aid, oh, you cannot see that at all. Oh boy. That sure is interesting. You can kind of see it there, but it'll probably be backwards. So here we have the year on the bottom and the amount of websites blocked, and it really goes, almost goes into it definitely does go into 6 figures, but it kind of ramps up over time, and it's different numbers of IPs being blocked and different types of internet connections and websites being blocked. So, let me betray that. Where was I? Yes. Even worse so, according to Reporters Without Borders, Russia ranks 149th out of 179 on the Press Freedom Index, mostly due to legislation furthering state control over the media specifically. In conclusion, Russian citizens technically have some civil liberties according to the Constitution, but recent events have seemed to contrast this a little bit, unfortunately, and that statement for sure has an asterisk above it. Now that I have covered Russia in some detail, I'll now be moving on to China and how their Chinese civil rights are handled. Once I had finished researching Russia, I had assumed that China's situation when it comes to civil liberties would be a little less complex and hopefully a little bit better, but after I had researched this for a degree of time, I learned that the Chinese also do have freedom of speech, sort of. In the Chinese Constitution, which I referenced electronically on March 8th, it specifically is listed in Article 35 that citizens of the People's Republic of China enjoy freedom of speech, of the press, of assembly, of association, of procession, and of demonstration. But once again, this article of legislation unfortunately comes with another big asterisk. And one of the biggest reasons for this asterisk is the Chinese policy on those that dissent from the government. For example, Emily Fang, a writer for NPR, writes on February 17th of 2020, that a famous rights activist by the name of Zhu Ziyang was arrested after an escalation of an ongoing crackdown of Chinese civil liberty groups. Sorry about that. Zhu's case is not a rare one, as rights activists in China are often arrested or censored. And here I have my second visual aid. This visual aid shows that there have been hundreds of Chinese civilians arrested on the basis of political dissent, whether it be peaceful or violent, and it has been ongoing for a couple years now, and it's really only gotten worse, unfortunately. So, with all that being said, the Chinese are also afforded some civil liberties, but are oftentimes vastly limited, especially when it comes to criticisms of their own government, and it's pretty unfortunate to say the least. To conclude, I believe that I have informed you all of the conditions of civil liberties that are afforded to those in foreign countries, specifically China and Russia. While researching for this speech, I would have never imagined as much of a drastic difference in civil liberties compared to those of China and Russia. So next time you make that political tweet or access a website, remember that we are lucky and even privileged to have the freedom of doing so. Thank you for listening to my speech.